I really love abstraction, and that is the reason why I really love your work. But in a way, I also know that people really need narration. I mean, it's a kind of ancestral necessity, if you want. And so the final question would be, have you ever been tempted by the narration? And if abstraction, maybe I tell what is for me, or I mean what it reveals for me. For me, it's really the possibility to live time in a kind of simultaneous way. That is to say that there is not a line, not past, present, future, but a kind of, a simultaneous condition. And this is also how nature works, because we are, with the language, very accustomed with, this kind of sequence. But abstraction for me is this marvelous way to think simultaneously. Is it something like that for you, or absolutely not?
I personally, I've always been what I would call, I suppose, an abstract artist, because what I do is not figurative. Now, this idea that inside a work has to be a narrative, that there should be some story, that there should be some reason for it being done, that is something which I've never insisted on being in the work, and I'll explain why. So, I begin in a way not from mathematics or geometry or a system like that, but to some degree I've always been fascinated by the way things work. Whether it's geometry, whether it's, in my case, often drawing the line in a different way, or producing something abstract. And when it is so abstract that there's clearly no link between the work and, let's say, the human being or the landscape or all these sorts of things, then people ask, what is it about? And I always feel that, for example, if I do the inside of this little chapel, there are clearly lines inside there which have a rhythm which is not straight, vertical or anything like that. They are a little bit imprecise lines. And it's very obvious when you look outside at the landscape, you have something similar going on. So I would say that those lines which I've drawn inside that chapel never came originally from here, ever, because if you actually look at what I did 10 years before, there were often these very imprecise lines. And those imprecise lines were a sort of mathematics in a way. But that mathematics, of course, did relate to the fact that I had traveled a lot in Africa, in the Far East. I had traveled for years. I was always looking at a landscape, a cityscape. I was always looking at these things. So in my memory, through my eyes, I have this visual thing of a line. Today, for example, things became a lot straighter, a lot more rigid, not so sort of imprecise. So the story behind what I do is not linked directly to the landscape here. It's not linked directly to anything. It's the story is my story as an artist from when I started, the systems I went through, the different changes that went through, that there is a story. There is something that people like to write about. Why does a person decide to make these lines? Why has he found this sort of mystical strangeness to use these lines? As opposed to, oh, I see the landscape there. I think I recognize La Morra from there. No. And I've never put into a work some inner meaning. There's never been an inner meaning to anything. The meaning of what I do is my experience as a human being, as an artist, over my lifetime of drawing, of doing the interiors of places.
Yeah. Meeting people.
Everything that occurs to me. I live an interesting life, I find. You know, I'm relatively positive as a character. All these different things. I like a lot of different forms of art and books and music, etc. But when it comes to what I make, there is not a story inside it.
Yeah.
And my feeling today, with a huge amount of what we see in the museums and the galleries, is that it's moved from pure abstraction to a quasi sort of abstraction where there is a bit of a meaning.
Okay.
You know, you can say, oh yes, well, it
yeah.
was the bar that I was in, I got a little bit drunk, and there's the picture of being drunk last night.
Okay.
Or there's a lot of narrative art today using photography, and even, let's say, the young Brits from the UK these days. It's all figurative in my view. It's totally a sort of figurative art. It's people expressing ideas about themselves.
This is the reason why maybe people can find an immersive environment by being in your works of art. That is to say that the possibility of living an existence, it's really the feeling I have personally, or maybe that this kind of environment can create with this kind of very enveloping maybe
Right.
atmosphere. And so this is the reason why I was talking about this unique time inside abstraction, because in the same time you have no distraction, because you are enveloped and encountered by these colors and shapes, but you can find a kind of not sequence but sense of the composition, what you maybe called rhythm in your talk before. And so yes, this
And
is
that, you know, for example, in the last 20 years or so, I work quite a lot with architects. Because architects, they come to me and they say, I have this space and, you know, it's an interesting space, but I need to do something with it. Can you assist in a way? And so if somebody would like to have the wall changed from just a normal wall where you hang something into something more of an artwork, that I quite enjoy this sort of balance and cooperation and participation with people like architects, because they've built a certain structure, and this structure I have to work inside that structure. I'm given the structure. So my next project would be to destroy that structure slightly, visually destroy it.
Yeah.
It still exists as a structure, but I can alter this structure. And that's, again, it's a sort of abstract concept in a way, but it has nothing to do with me putting on that surface my story.
sure.
I'm putting on that surface a list of ideas. I'm putting on that surface some strict discipline almost. I'm putting on that surface things which I feel have quality, which are strong, which are to my liking, of course. But I never wish to be, personal about it. I don't want to give away any of my personality.
Yeah, but
My personality is my problem. My personality is something I keep very private with just a few people. And if I speak with you now, I'm giving you a little bit of that personality.
Thank you.
No. But in terms of being an artist,
Sure.
I have no desire to express my personality. I don't think it's very important. I think it's much more important to try and dig out those great ideas that maybe exist within your lifespan and what you got, and compose them into work.
Yeah. Related.
And forget your problems.
Sure.
Forget your problems.
It's very, very clear. Yeah.
And that way, in fact, you don't have so many problems.
Nice.
Far less problems, I
This
tell
is
you. Far less.
A very good method.
You don't have the problems in the end. You can.
Yeah, really. Why not? We have to try.
Well, of course, everybody has a few problems, but nothing so serious,
Yeah. And related to this idea of composition, I have the impression that your way in which you try again.
Bit of a tourist spot here.
Yeah, normal. Okay. Related to this idea of composition, I have the impression that you have a strict language. With strict, I mean that it's a little bit codified, like a language, maybe in the sense of the science. I mean, you normally use quasi-geometrical shapes, but in a way that is not so impossible to read a kind of language. I mean, maybe the fascination for the science you met in your travels as, in a way, weight on it, or not?
Yeah. So, in the 70s, when I'd finished being a student, and I hadn't travelled long term at that point, but I'd already been a little bit in Europe. I was also interested in music, and in the music of people like John Cage,
Sure.
of Philip Glass, of Steve Reich. I was at that period. I
Yeah.
met them all, and I saw concerts
Wow.
of them all, and so that was my time. And there was something about that very interesting serial thing, whether it was as strict as the clapping music of
Yeah, I see.
Reich or the slightly odd stuff of John Cage. I liked that sort of movement. I like the idea of language as a written form. So for years I've always used words. Not here and not in, let's say,
Okay.
but for example, I was saying to Roberta the other day, 6 years ago I did a work in New York in a gallery just after Saul had died. So after we'd done this chapel, probably 2 or 3 years later. And this work, I wrote the word La Morra. So in quite large letters, the word La Morra,
okay.
there is a drawing that goes with it, but I would use language frequently in work.
Yeah.
I used to speak some Swahili.
Wow.
And so I would use Swahili and English, and I would find these sentences which meant, which were to do with space and where you are and what you are doing, and a little bit the place you are in. But nobody, of course, understands Swahili. English was sometimes translated, but it was always done in a sort of rather like musical paper. This idea of the rhythm.
Yeah, sure.
It was going left to right, left to right, left to right. And consequently, a lot of the big drawings which I've recently been doing in different places, there is always this idea of reading it.
Yeah.
You're reading it somehow. And I hope almost here you read it as a passage of
Yeah,
time,
because-
but it's to read it.
Yeah.
It's less of a, it's not so much about what does it mean, nothing. You just read it.
Following, with the mind. And actually, the first painting were a sort of mix between language and image. The Rupestrian, do you say Rupestrian in English, or on the rocks?
Yeah.
Praised historical.
Yeah, you mean cave drawings.
Cave drawings. And so maybe this is an origin, a very, very old
Well,
origin.
I would say cave painting is also something about like a diary.
A diary,
How we write
Yeah, yeah,
diaries today, or did write diaries. This was a document of their times, and maybe just a way of referring to something. And the great thing is they still exist somehow,
yeah.
and so it's the only way we can understand a bit of.
Yeah.
But for sure, the painting on the sides of the cave and all these things. This is a magnificent sort of chance for people like me to see how people worked on the wall surface. But it's not really. It's more. This is memory. This is diary. This is indicating to people, other people,
Ritual, maybe also.
ritual,
Yeah.
all of this thing. And there was never, I think, a sort of intellectual climate existing at the time which really demanded much more than just reference to everyday objects.
But what interests me was maybe this kind of coincidence between image and written language. I mean, there was not a difference in the sense maybe like Chinese ideograms or ideograms are today. And so this is maybe the same feeling I have being there inside your works, because there is a kind of seamlessy line that brings from, how can I say, from something that is nature and something that is culture. It's a kind of wonderful mix for me. And so it is the same for me with this prehistorical drawing, and this kind of wonderful mixture. Anyway.
No, in my past I've seen, for example, in Australia and places like
yes,
I saw quite a lot of early Aboriginal work, and some of the cave paintings there, and in Africa too. And for me, they're always, I'm looking at something from the serious past, you know, the real past. I'm looking at something where people, nothing to do with my modern culture like you and me and everybody. It's another way of documenting. It's a sort of amazing document. And sometimes, I suppose, what we do as artists is a sort of document. It's our period, it's our time. We've gone through 300, 400 years of culture to get to, from the Renaissance to now, to get what we are doing now. Everything is linked, everything, as you know. I don't exist.
Connection,
None of us exist without what went before us, so we're not these sort of super individuals that come up with something special. Even science is the same. You would never find something for polio or something, a vaccine, unless you'd gone before. We are all part of history. And therefore what we do is a document, an interesting document. And I think this document is really then what we started the conversation about, is a document about personality and the ego and the reason why certain people are artists, let's say, or is it a document of a way of thinking? And of course this way of thinking is my ego, but I don't think my ego as a human being enters into it too much. You know, I really limit this ego in it. I like to keep it quite clean from anything personal, and therefore, and this is not a sort of cold, you know, uncaring, hard line I take. I am a very warm person, I think.
Yeah, but also because you are inside nature. I mean, maybe you feel this link with nature.
Well, it's not just nature, remember. It's also me being alone in a studio, often for days and days and days. And I am not a social character. I don't go out very much at all. I really enjoy being alone. I look for silence. Of course, I have to talk, but I have a family and I'm a normal human being, all that sort of stuff. But I really enjoy my own silence. So, for example, my wife goes down to London in the day and I am alone for 8 hours every day, and I love it. I need nobody.
I understand very well.
I can turn on my radio sometimes to listen to some music or something special.
Some contact with the word.
But I am always happy to be alone. And I learned that 35, 40 years ago when I traveled from England to Australia, for example, by land, or all those things where you are constantly alone.
But when I talked before nature, I mean that you are part of something, maybe. Nature, I mean the sense of universal.
Yes, my environment is, of course, my world.
I can read in,
for sure. And you know, I am now a...
Where?
I am an honorary citizen of La Morra now.
Did
you know this?
I know, because I have to reveal that I wrote the speech for the Sindaco.
Okay.
So, she asked me.
Well done, well done. No, I love that.
And my husband made the graphics for that.
Okay.
So,
no, but it was very sweet.
Very sweet.
I loved it.
So simple.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
No, it was such a, how you say, a gesture for me that came a little bit from the heart. And
it is, I think so.